Thank you. Thanks. My name is Rob Thwaites. I'm with Takeda, and I'm a co-leader on Work Package 1. And thank you for joining us today. Pal, Sarah, and I have prepared about 20 minutes worth of slides on behalf of Work Package 1 that we want to share with you. Talk a little bit about the rationale for what we're doing. Talk about how Work Package 1 fits in with the overall Get Real framework and how we're working to bring the materials that the other work packages have produced together. And I'd like to just mention, make a couple of points from a pharmaceutical company perspective, because I think this is really important what we're doing now, and it can change how we plan during drug development. And then Pal's going to talk a little bit more about some of the outputs and the navigator, which is absolutely critical for helping us see the wood from the trees. There's a lot of work being done in Get Real. There's many different types of outputs, software, reports, case studies that you can use. And the navigator, which you'll be able to see at lunchtime, when we've got the open session at lunchtime, is the key piece of software that you can use to think through the questions and the issues that you've got as you're either developing or assessing evidence, and you can use this to see the wood from the trees. It's critical. And if I could just say one thing before we finish. As Rick said, we're on a journey. It's constantly evolving, this environment, this landscape. But we're at a milestone now where Get Real is completing. We've produced all these materials. For us, it's in effect the beginning of a journey for those who are going to use the outputs from Get Real. We, for example, in pharma now need to go and talk to our project teams, the people who lead the drug development programs, and to help them understand just how useful this will be. And I really think that what we've done is a huge and very rich repository of guidance, of tools and documents. I've never seen anything like it. It is really, really useful in helping us plan for and conduct evidence development. So just to recap, I know many of you have been involved in Get Real, but there's others of you for whom this is new. Just wanted to talk about why we need to change, what's changing in the environment, and what Get Real is producing. So we know that in the environment there are lots of pressures to change. For example, there's increasing and changing demands from stakeholders, decision makers other than regulators, including the proliferation of health technology assessment agencies, formularies, payers. And these demands are increasing. These demands for evidence are increasing, and they're becoming more sophisticated. There's pressures for patients to get earlier access to medicines, and people are questioning the standard drug development pathway. And you saw the slide that Rick put up earlier with the standard pathway. And as a result of that, we are looking at the possibility across jurisdictions of different reimbursement and market access systems. And then we've got rare diseases, for example, where we know that we're not necessarily going to have the data that we would expect under the normal pathways, and we need to think about how can we produce evidence that's going to help decision makers assess the likely future effectiveness of these drugs. So we've got these changes going on in terms of the environment, these challenges. And then on the other side, we've got what you might say facilitating mechanisms that are making it easier or possible to do things that we couldn't have done before. So given that we know that we've got insufficient evidence, and some of the evidence we've got is not adequate for decision making, what else can we do in terms of data, in terms of methods, in terms of approaches, in terms of communication that might allow us to overcome some of these challenges? We've got greater availability of real world data, particularly individual patient level data, and of course now available over the last 20 years increasingly electronically. and we've got new methods to process and analyze that data. And I think what Get Real has done is we've looked at these challenges and we've thought, well, what can we do as a group together to help move this forward? And so we have thought about not just documenting what the challenges are, but putting together suggestions for different methods, new approaches, new pieces of software. And what you're going to see today is a lot of the outputs from this. So it's not just documenting where we stand and what needs to be done. We've actually produced outputs from this 3-year program that people can use in their day-to-day work. Rick talked about the different work packages. So in work package 1, in the same way as all the work packages, produced a number of outputs in terms of original research, methods, case studies, and tools. So did we in work package 1. So we had particular case studies, 5 or 6 different case studies with specific disease areas where we looked at alternative methods of assessing relative effectiveness. We produced reports on the case studies. We had workshops which allowed us to explore the questions of likely acceptability of these approaches if a company proposed to do this in the future. And we also, in our own way, we produce tools as well. So the big tool that you're going to see later on is the Navigator, which is the way in which you can go navigate around all this information in a coherent way, in a sensible way, and one that reflects the way in which you would think about what evidence do I need to provide and why, and what are the issues I'm going to face as I do it. So the Navigator really helps you move through the relevant questions and identifies the pieces of information and guidance that are there within Get Real and from elsewhere to help you plan for new drug development or assess new drugs. We're work package 1, as I said. The work package structure that Rick mentioned, we're one of the 4, and you'll hear from the other 3 groups shortly. Our role was, as I said, to not only to come up with some of these case studies and examples, but to try and bring the material together in a coherent way. Just wanted to comment on the partnership point, because I think this has been really important for us as we've worked. It's in our work package, but I'm sure the experience from other work packages has been the same, because what we've done is we've taken particular tasks and worked together as groups. We've worked with health technology assessment agencies, such as the ones that Rick mentioned. They've all been involved in the work that we've done, and they've all contributed to the workshops that we've run. We've had other HTA agencies joining the workshops as well, for example. We've worked with the patient organisation, IAPO, as well, and they helped us a lot on quite a unique piece of work. I'll talk about that in a minute. That I think you'll find interesting and valuable for planning in the future. We've worked with a range of academic organisations and also the pharma companies have contributed their staff time, and a lot of them have contributed data and information for the case studies. And I'd just like to pay tribute to all the people that have contributed their time. I know in pharma that when somebody says, do you want to join an IMI program? Do you want to join Get Real? People put their hand up because they're genuinely interested in it and they genuinely believe we can make a difference, and we are doing. But nobody turns around, your boss never turns around to you and says, well, you're going to spend a day a week on this. Why don't you, I'll take away this piece of your job and you don't have to spend a day a week on that. It never happens. So thank you to all those people that have put in extra hours as we've gone through this. Yeah, a couple of the points, reiterating a couple of points that Rick made. We through the partnership and through doing these joint projects, we've been able to address these issues together, novel methodological solutions, compilation of best practice recommendations. We didn't always agree, but the very fact that we were able to work together meant that we were able to produce shared and agreed deliverables in the end. We'll talk a bit, perhaps later on, about the future research agenda. Just wanted to mention, I know I'm running out of time, a couple of the case studies we did just to make this a bit more tangible. First of all, let's mention there was the non-small cell lung cancer study. So as an example, what this was doing was a collaboration within Work Package 1, but really led by one of the companies, Eli Lilly, and Leicester worked really hard on this as well. And looking at two things really: propensity weighting using real-world data to apply to clinical trial populations, so that you'd be able to generalize the effect of a clinical trial results, and thereby producing information that would be more relevant for a health technology assessment agency. So that was one aspect of it. And another aspect of it was extrapolation using real-world data, of clinical trial results. So thinking about aspects of progression-free survival and overall survival, and looking at the methods and the acceptability of the methods. And the workshop that we held about that, we were able to have a good discussion about the acceptability of that. And even though we found that it was early days, we know that these methods would be usable within pharma in planning. There's more skepticism on the usefulness of this at this stage within HTA agencies. But if this is the way the thinking is going, and you've got a drug that's 6 years from registration, you need to be thinking ahead as to what if this is an approach that will be acceptable in the future. So that was one particular case study where there's research done, there's reports that are out there on the Get Real website, and the outputs are going to help us in the future. The other piece of research I wanted to mention was the one down in the bottom left-hand corner there, patient-powered research networks, which, for those of you who are not familiar with that, are online platforms where patients, typically with a certain condition, share their information, whether it's their electronic medical record or information gathered through PROs. And these are still nascent, they're still fairly new. There aren't many of them, but we did a report on what's out there now, and we did a survey as well amongst stakeholders, KOLs, and decision makers, and found a lot of interest, a lot of excitement about the usefulness of this data in the future for comparative effectiveness research. So again, this is something that we can all do. If you just go to the website, you can look at these two reports, and if you've got a drug that's 5 or 6 years away from launch, that is something that you might want to think about. Are these groups that we could collaborate with and produce information over the next few years that will be of use to decision makers in the early 2020s? Practical lessons. I'll skip over this because I know I'm running out of time. Just wanted to mention about using real-world data within pharma and why this is so important. You know that we already use real-world data within developments for many, many different aspects of what we do. Within file and launch, we're increasingly using it with external stakeholders rather than using it to inform internal development programs, and then in post-marketing. But what's with Get Real, the opportunity is that in the future, and remember that with Get Real, our focus was pre-launch. What can we do pre-launch or during launch? And thinking about the new things that we might be able to do in the future. And these are some of the things that we need to think about as pharma companies in the future. So my parting message to you is what we've got here in Get Real as we reach this milestone is a rich source of guidance, tools, and information. I know from my own company that everybody's excited about this, and we're at the start of a journey of thinking about how we use this and how we implement what we've learned in evidence planning within my company. But I encourage you to go to the website. I encourage you to look at the navigator later today, because this is really something special. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Rob, for introducing Work Package 1 so nicely. So I'll just briefly skip over this. So this is just to demonstrate the incredible breadth of material that has been created by the consortium over the last 3 years. And essentially, I want to highlight that this isn't just work done by Work Package 1, this is generated by the whole of the consortium. For instance, we have methodology on network meta-analysis. We have various work on how to adjust and detect bias in observational data. Novel work that's been done by some of the other work packages. We have generated, as a whole consortium, software tools and checklists and so on to guide people who are involved in evidence generation early on to help them address the effectiveness issues and generate the right sort of evidence that will take, hopefully, a drug successfully through assessment by the regulators and HTA bodies. What we've done, particularly in Work Package 1, as Rob alluded to and explained, is the case studies where we sat together with stakeholders, so pharma companies, the regulators, HTA bodies, patients, and so on, looking at drugs that had gone through assessments earlier on, both the regulatory assessment and the HTA assessment, looked at where the evidence gaps were and what were the difficulties really in assessing the effectiveness and relative effectiveness of the new drugs going through these assessments. We then brainstormed a bit and looked at how can we address those effectiveness issues, what sort of real-world evidence options and solutions could we apply to those, and tested the acceptability of those solutions with the stakeholders, with the regulators, with the HTA bodies, to see whether any of those could be brought forward more into real practice. We created also quite a lot of original research, really, and this will be explained in greater detail by the other work packages later on. But for instance, we looked at, as a consortium, the drivers of effectiveness, the analytical methods that you can use on real-world data, and so on. So just to flag that there is quite a lot of exciting material here. Rob touched on some of those. So for instance, we got something that people don't really think about in this context. We've got social media in there. We were thinking about how this exciting, potentially new platform of generating evidence could be used. We realize it is challenging and not straightforward. We want to explore with stakeholders what could be done about data generated through this media. So having thought long and hard about how to collate all the data that has been generated over the last 3 years, we thought about how best to do it. And instead of generating a paper document or an online document, we thought about a framework, and that sort of developed into a concept of a navigator. So the navigator really takes the stakeholder or the user through the process of thinking about issues in evidence generation, issues in taking a drug through the assessments, and then sort of outlines at the same time what potential options there are to address those issues. We felt that the online platform would be much more suitable for this purpose. And at the same time, more importantly, the navigator serves as a portal that introduces people who are interested in effectiveness research, introduces the concept and the issues around effectiveness research prior to market launch of drugs, because we felt that before you start to take people through the potential options, you need to understand why you might want to use them. So essentially, this is a website that sort of outlines the issues, provides options, and at the same time is a repository for all the wonderful and diverse material that we have created over the last 3 years. I'm just going to really briefly just show you the sort of examples of the categories that are included in the navigator. So we've got sources of real-world data, really listing what are the typical sources of real-world data out there. We've got outline pages that outline the different study designs that are available. We've got summaries of evidence synthesis and methods that can be applied to real-world data, how to quality assure real-world data and make sure that you can rely on the synthesis. We've got various models of effectiveness in real-world setting, how to, for instance, extrapolate data using real-world data to help extrapolation, and so on. How to adjust for bias, and most importantly, I think also about governance of real-world data, which is an issue that we need to be thinking about. So, very briefly, we're really excited to be opening this web portal up now for you guys to have a look at. This is a soft launch today, and We're demonstrating the navigator earlier, actually at lunchtime today. So I would encourage you to come and see us, have a play with it and see what you feel. We're really keen on getting your comments now and feedback so that we can make sure that it addresses the issues that we want to address. And we've got some time until the full launch in early February to make changes if need be. But really excited, so come and see us later today. Thank you.